Welcome to the Fan Method, the aesthetics, health, and wellness podcast dedicated to helping you look and feel your best inside and out. Have you ever wondered what the future of health, aging, and beauty looks like? What if the key to reversing the effects of aging, transforming your body, and achieving radiant health wasn't about quick fixes, but cutting edge science that works with your body at its most fundamental level, the cells? Today, we're diving into three of the hottest topics in health and beauty: aging, aesthetics, and the Ozempic revolution. Joining me is none other than Dr. William Seeds, a global leader in cellular medicine. As the founder of the Seeds Scientific Research and Performance Institute, Dr. Seeds has trained thousands of physicians worldwide on how to use cellular medicine and peptides to help patients look younger, recover faster, and live healthier, more vibrant lives. In this episode, we'll explore how cellular medicine is redefining aging, how peptides are transforming non-surgical aesthetics and enhancing surgical outcomes, and what's behind the Ozempic makeover trend, plus how to overcome its challenges like muscle loss and sagging skin. We'll also share practical advice to help you take action safely and avoid common pitfalls in this new frontier of health. This episode is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about aging, beauty, and transformation. Dr. Seeds, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Dr. Fan. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. Now, I know you've been a pioneer in the cellular medicine space for several years, but let's go back to the beginning. What sparked your interest in this field?
Wow. Um, Actually, it's kind of a personal story. It started back. I was 16 years of age, and I had a very close relationship with my father, who was very athletic, my best friend, my mentor. We worked out together, and um, he had a cardiac event on the track, and he died in front of me, and I could do nothing to help him. And it was uh, it was something where it didn't make sense to me. Like, here was this person that I thought exemplified health, and yet he dies. There's nothing I could do to help him. And I said, right there at that point in time in my life, I knew I knew where it was headed. It was okay. There's got to be answers. This can't happen to anybody else. And that started me on my personal journey of focusing on learning everything I could about and asking questions about why this happened.
Yeah.
And it's gotten me here.
Wow. That's a really powerful story.
It still drives me today.
Yeah.
It's I'll never be satisfied. I'll never um the it's one of these things where you lose a parent early. I, I'm I'm waiting for the day when my dad can tell me he's proud of me for what I've done. And that'll never happen.
Yeah. I can understand both as a parent and as a son. Now, I know that sounds obviously a very powerful sort of motivator for you. I wanted to ask you, was there a pivotal moment in your life when you realized the power of cellular medicine? Whether it was a patient success story or a research breakthrough or another personal moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I was so so for me, I realized early on in medical school that there were things that I had. How do I say this? So in college, I was a finance major, but I actually went to the library every day to do my own research on my mission, and that was to start figuring things out. I spent a lifetime while in school, while I was getting my finance major, to focus on understanding the cell, understanding everything I could, asking my own questions. And I got to this point of where I'm about to graduate with this finance degree, and I end up while I'm doing that, I'm like helping my friends with their biochem, their chem, their physics, and I'm like, I should do something with this. And that drove me to look at the potential of medical school. Back then when we went, there were like you had to follow this guided path, right, to get to med school. Well, I went to the people in charge to help you get ready for med school and so forth, and the I don't know what you called them at that time, but they were advisors.
Pre-med advisor.
Yes, pre-med advisor. And I walked in and I asked this guy, I said, "Hey, look, I'm about to graduate in finance. Could I take the test for medical school and go to medical school?" This guy looks at me and he says, "No." And he goes, you can't even do that. You're not in the right path." And I didn't know what that meant. And he really blew me off and he pissed me off. And I said, I'm not going to use profanity here, but I just said, screw that. And I, uh, I ended up, I ended up making an appointment down at the local medical school for someone to help me. And cause I asked them, I said, look, I'm a finance major. I want to go to medical school. I'm pretty sure I could do okay. And can you guys help me? So they were like, they had me down there. They said, now look, basically you got to do classes. You got to do courses. We'll give you a plan, but it's going to take you about a year and a half we want you to get your chem degree. So I said, you tell me what to do and I'll do it. And so in a year and a half, I got my chem degree.
Yeah.
And then I did that thing you could do back then. I applied early admission to the same place because they were nice to me. And I got in early admission. And I was the only one from our school at that time that got the early admission. So I went back to that advisor and I said, hey, I heard you got somebody into this medical school. And this guy said, yeah, he's one of our good students. And we're just so excited for him. And I go, that was me. I go, do you remember me? And this guy's like looking at me. I go, you're the guy who told me I couldn't do this. And so that's what, it's always been those challenges that pushed me. And I don't know if that answered the question.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
But it was that beginning that led me to, there's always an answer. Don't let anybody tell you can't do anything because you can, right?
Yeah.
And so that took me into the field of, I saw things a little different in medical school. It was hard to stay engaged because I just had so many other things in my head. And
Yeah.
I got through that and went into orthopedics because it was a place I saw where cellular medicine could be applied very early, because of the injuries, the fixes that could occur quickly. And so right off the bat, I started seeing how if you look for not just fixing something surgically, but if you set your patient up to set the environment right in the body, surgery is going to be way better, right?
Yeah.
And then and serendipitously, I found that I was seeing people not even get into the OR because I was making them better that I wasn't really expecting.
Yeah.
And then that just took me deeper and deeper. And so I was in a good place, fortunately, at that time when, athletes the business has changed a lot in professional athletes, but back then decisions could be made quickly. There weren't too many people that had control of the athlete.
Yeah.
And you could really do a lot to get these athletes that potentially were going to lose their big contracts because they were told they were done. So I ended up being that guy that kind of was under the radar who I helped some people get there. And so that kind of started
Yeah. Yeah.
so it wasn't just one, it was a, repetitive. Um, I was just fortunate to be in the right space with the right type of patients, that wanted to be engaged and who were, as you know, with your surgeries and the things you do with your patients, it's a team effort, right? And I mean, just like you're doing here and educating your patients, I mean, who does that? This is amazing what you're doing, by the way.
Yeah.
And that was the part that made it easy because these people had big incentives to get back, right? So I had total control from the beginning
Yeah.
to the surgery, to the treatments, to the therapy. And I was fortunate enough to also be in a facility that I could get them back on their playing field and, do all the things that worked. So
It's fascinating to hear sort of your early interest and how that's translated into the rest of your career. But one of the interesting things to me, most people, go to medical school, they probably start off thinking about, the person, much like, your, father is obviously, an inspiration. And yet people think of, you know, um, whole person's body parts, organs, but it sounds like you are from an early stage already thinking about the cell. How did you, have the insight to, to realize that the cell was the place to focus?
that's a great question that I think I can expand on significantly. So you have to shut me down because I could go on for days. But I'm going to tell you, it started with, again, with my father and training and working out and respecting the body. He taught me something that, that, um, that I'll never let go of. It's what you put in, not just, like your brain and learning. It's what you put in your body, and how you treat your body is how it's going to respond. And so I learned very early on with working out, training, resistance exercise, and we didn't know it, but high intensity training that I didn't know I was doing back then. That's now a name that I would see changes in myself that I wasn't seeing in other people at my age, and I was doing more. I was capable of. I was comfortable, and I could work out, and you could start to see, like, I could feel how I would recover better, and so when you see, as a young person, when you see, doing, like, resistance exercises and you see a muscle get bigger, it just made me think about, well, why is that I know it's working, so that was always in my head. And then when I got into the aspect of trying to figure out, how my father died as a healthy person, it my direction was very clear. It had to do with how things change in the body, and there had to be a beginning. And so I'm not gonna say it happened overnight. It just happened over. I was very fortunate to have a book that was written by some biochemists that I read 33 times in college. It was like my Bible, um, that actually had a chapter to teach you how to research. And so I learned how to do things. Didn't have the internet then, but I could, it was that constantly asking questions, and then it got me to that place of, okay, well, if I'm comfortable in this exercise world, there's got to be a lot of literature out there that starts talking about exercise. And so as you got into exercise and nutrition, there was this vast, vast, vault of papers that have been written for the last 40 years. It's never ending. That would start getting me to these places of, you read something and you don't understand it, right? And so then you got to read it again, and then it leads you to another place, because you keep asking questions.
Yeah.
And that got me to, oh my gosh, this cell is this place of incredible intelligence that we don't understand. And no one has the answer to how this cell adapts, right? To exercise, adapts to life, adapts to everyday stressors. And it was just fascinating. And it just kept me engaged. Okay, I got to learn more about the cell. And then when you start finding out what's in the cell, oh my gosh, it's just, I'm still learning, right? I know this much. It's just, so that's kind of it's a never ending passion to learn more, because the more you find, the more you search, the more you realize you don't know enough.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can totally relate, as a fellow surgeon, I always joke with some of my patients about anatomy. The human body, an amazingly like well-designed, like organism, right? Anatomy probably hasn't changed in, forever.
Yeah,
And yet the more you learn about anatomy, the more you realize there's another 10 layers to like understand it, right? And
correct.
it's actually it's fascinating. Even we can slice open any part of our body and start unraveling the layers, but there's always another layer to sort of see and to know about. And they actually have real applicability in surgery particularly, as well as medicine.
Yeah, and we used to I'm sure it's the same, is the from the same viewpoint. I used to think of anatomy as destiny. If you know your anatomy, you're gonna find a way to get there, right? But it's so funny. You see it in your textbooks, right? You think you know it all, and you get in there, and it's like, okay, I got to figure this out. This isn't like the book,
Yeah.
and that keeps humbling you all the way through, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I-
Absolutely.
And anatomy is destiny, but you got to figure your way around because the population is heterogeneous. There's all these variants in everybody, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's fascinating, right? Biology itself, fascinating. And I want to transition to talk little bit about aging. So this is a topic of interest, certainly to sort of our viewers, but also really to the general public. But, with aging, a lot of us, think of the external signs of aging, like wrinkles and gray hair, but it's what happens inside that really matters, right? And the cell is fundamental to aging. Is that right?
Absolutely. So the so by going back and talking about what I said before about understanding just how a cell is normal in normal conditions, how a cell reacts to and adapts to exercise, how a cell reacts and adapts to certain stressors. If we know the the way the cell thinks, because it's always the same molecular pathways don't change. You know, um, Molecular pathways are kind of like the destiny. Anatomy is destiny. Molecular pathways are the destiny of the cell, and so once you start appreciating like how the cell talks and communicates in signals, you start and the research and data that's out there that's already shown us how a cell reacts normally to um, to exercise, to reduce sleep, to different nutritional statuses, to stressors, anxiety, um, viral infections, bacterial infections. Once you know how the cell tries to adapt and adjust, you start seeing pathways. That's what happens. That's how I see things. And then you start to appreciate this incredible, intelligent being that is a cell that if you if you see that, then and the cell is can make it's meant to make its own decisions to survive and adapt, then you start to appreciate that having the knowledge base of what a normal cell does, and then let's go to the other side and say, what happens to that cell when it becomes cancerous? Well, then you learn a whole new aspect of how cancer actually can rearrange all those pathways in favor of itself to immortalize it and separate itself from other cells and live as long as it wants to live because it's pretty smart. Well, so if you start seeing all those things, then it only makes sense to start going back and looking at all the literature with aging and all the literature and there's a plethora of information out there in um, starting with animal studies and or worms, animal studies, humans, and then we start to see, okay, this is what happens during aging. We lose certain signaling agents over time. Why do we lose them? How does that happen? Is it different under different circumstances? And the answer is yes, 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 yes. So then you come to respect this fact that, okay, maybe we can do some things to influence the cell to, let's say, age gracefully, to give it more capability of handling things, because that's what basically happens. That aging is more or less the cell just doesn't have the capability to do what it wants to do because it's not getting the signaling. And so, if we can do things to enhance the signaling, hence good diet, great exercise, good sleep, reduce stress, just the right things, those things have a great influence on how that cell ages. And so if you can if you can put all those things together, it's amazing how you can look to not now treating a symptom, right? You can go to the beginning and say, "Hey, I've got a root cause that I know, this patient after the age of, at this age from 30 to 50, we start losing mitochondria. We start decreasing the amount of NAD production. We start losing certain important amino acids in the Krebs cycle. And all these things just start to make sense. And so if you know that, well, why don't you work backwards and let's start making the environment better? Does that add up?
Absolutely. And if you were, and if we wanted to sort of explain this in simple terms to the person who's curious, well, what exactly, is happening to this cell, or why does it, why is it not getting the signaling? What does that lead to? If you had to describe it in simple terms, and maybe I'll ask, is at the heart of it, is it about sort of oxidative stress? And I know, one of your, excellent books, the Redox was about that in particular.
Yeah, and that's exactly, it's a balance. The cell's losing a balance. So a cell has to adapt every day to life. And it goes through all these biochemical pathways to adapt to everyday life. Well, sometimes the cell has to work hard, depending on what the stressor is, to to manage that day. So those stressors can cause the cell to work harder, causing a stress, and we call it an oxidative stress. The cell is also capable of making its own antioxidants that can control those those stressors, which we call reactive oxygen species. So it's a balance. And so what happens is the cell loses the capability of maintaining balance. And that's where everybody, I think, goes. I think that's what people don't respect. It's just a balance. It's not supercharging something. It's keeping the physiology and the biochemistry of the cell in balance. And that's all the cell wants. It's just like, give me a little bit and I'll show you the way. And that's you I think you hit it on the head with what you said there.
Yeah, and it's something that I, have come to really appreciate so much in biology, medicine, nature. It is about balance, sort of like a yin and a yang, right? Is it inflammation or is it healing? Is it fibrosis? And all of these things. And the amazing part, Mother Nature, naturally, when we're young and healthy, gets these things often quite right. But then as we get older, the environment changes and things get out of balance. And we see that with so many things. I want to sort of ask you, and so how can cellular medicine, how can it sort of, how does it play a role in helping to sort of modulate aging, so to speak, or to improve aging?
So that's the next step, right? That's the cellular medicine allows the physician or the healthcare provider to have maybe just a little better look inside of how they can just help the cell become healthier, right? It's all it is give the cells the signaling it needs to be healthier. And it's that simple. It's giving it, we're not trying to change, we're not trying to tell the cell what to do. We're trying to give it its signaling, its messaging, because cells are talking. They're always talking and communicating. And so as you age, communication gets a little off the track. And by using cellular medicine, and cellular medicine is all about keeping the balance, and you do that through it's a very comprehensive look. There's not just one answer. It's not one pill. It's not one supplement. It's not one exercise. It's the combination of everything in giving the cell its multiple ways of retaining its balance. So you can use peptides and supplements and repurposed drugs and um, good diet and good sleep and all these things come into play, and it just keeps going. I mean, you can get into all of the you can get into the circadian rhythms of the cells and the central pacemaker and the hypothalamus. You can just go and go and go. But if you have that knowledge, it's incredible. If you can give that cell the right signaling agents, it it can really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in practical terms, for the average person, now we're talking about a number of essential elements. So, nutrition, exercise, rest, stress management, and then on top of that, the extra things are they peptides and supplements? Is it more than that? Is it
So that's a great question, and I think from the cell signaling aspect, the peptides are the more powerful agents there because they're actually they're actually what the body makes. Depending on the signaling and what cell makes them, it's how cells communicate. It's how they maintain their balance. So all we're basically doing is we're synthesizing something that you make to help that cell do a better job at whatever you're trying to work on. If it, you know, for everybody, as time changes, it's brain fog, it's anxiety, it's performance, it's how do you help the cell do a better job with all of those? Well, there are ways that you can use these signaling agents that we make. And I think the best, gosh, if we had to look at this right now, we could say two things. We could say, everybody know what insulin is? Well, that's been around for over 100 years and changed the landscape for people to survive diabetes. Guess what? That's a peptide. When I first started lecturing and I'd say, how many doctors out there use peptides? Nobody raised their hand. I go, does anybody use insulin? Everybody raises their hand. It's that understanding what these are and what's the second wave since insulin? It's this explosion of GLP-1s, of the Wegovy's, the semaglutides. It's another explosion of, and again, that's a peptide. That's something you make in your L cells, in your ileum and proximal colon. You make those. So it's it's just fascinating where this is all going finally, where it's not that it's not that we haven't known about it. I mean, we've known about these agents for the last 100 years. It's just now we have the ability to synthesize and utilize these now in a place. If you're familiar with these pathways, you can really make some changes. And so I think that's why everything's exploding in this area, and the aspects of having to all of us having to go through COVID, where people all of a sudden now are paying more attention to their health. Like, what could I do to offset another potential process like what's happened with COVID? So that's kind of, I think, why this has all become more relevant.
Yeah, it is fascinating that COVID definitely has introduced a new stress into all of our lives and our health. And, when you see people, having these very profound and extreme reactions to, a virus, it definitely has, woken a lot of people up to just look more closely and to really pay attention.
Absolutely.
Silver lining. Now, when it comes to sort of, developing a treatment program, for patients, on the one hand, there's sort of biological age and how, a person's body or cells function. There's chronological age, obviously the actual age that they are. But how do you actually, does biological age, is that something that plays into a role in how you assess people and design treatment plans for them? And if it is, how do you actually assess that?
Well, and that's a really good question because I don't wanna sound, so I'm pretty black and white about things sometimes about what's out there and what people are promoting, and I think if I could get people to focus on, what is biological age, chronological age, what does that really mean? To me, it means nothing. It's about if my focus is on the cell to improve the efficiencies, um, and flexibility, meaning making that cell healthier, right? Well, I'm gonna be taking care of all those problems. So age, that stuff doesn't matter, and what are you gonna treat? Where when people get a methylation study and say, "Oh, my biological age is this, but my chronological age is that," I'd say, "What the hell does that mean?" What are you gonna does that mean anything?
Yeah.
It means nothing. To me, that's a people have fallen into the, um, marketing of things that don't matter, because if you're focusing on the cell, you're never gonna go wrong, and you're gonna be accomplishing all the things y that you want to accomplish in improving it this age issue. But it's like but let me take that a step further, Dr. Fent. If you're that's almost like you're focused on, and no disrespect to anybody focusing on longevity, but it's all about tomorrow and the next day. It's quality of life, right? It's not it's not you can there I could show you hundreds of thousands of people that live long, but they're not healthy and they're miserable. What does that mean? It means nothing. If you're focused on the cell and you're focused on quality of life, then maybe in the next 50 to 100 years, we'll see from the research that, oh, we are improving longevity, right? So that's kind of how I
It is it is more health span as opposed to
absolutely,
lifespan.
you hit it on the head.
Now, of course, everyone watching there, most people will be wondering, well, gosh, so, you're telling me you can I can get some treatment and have my cells and my body sort of function better so I can have, more energy or, better quality of life. But people will wonder like, hey, what is, realistic? If I'm 70 years old, can I feel like I'm 20 again? Is that realistic or is that even like the wrong way to be thinking about things? It really is about, it's really about just being the best sort of version of you and as better tomorrow, today and tomorrow.
Boy, you asked really good questions. That so that's where the patient and doctor or healthcare provider, the interface becomes so important because you have to have participation. Um, I think anything's possible. I don't ever discount anything. It's anything is possible. So if you take that 70-year-old, for example, is it possible for them to feel like they felt when they were in their 20s? Absolutely. But it's gonna take hard work. It's not gonna be an overnight thing. It's gotta be a process that the patient buys into first. They've gotta feel and see some results, and then what they have to do is they have to be part of the equation and start asking questions too. "Hey, I like the way we started here. What else can I do? What" and this is where we become, I think, even more powerful when we empower our patients with information and not all the, how do I say this? Not all the noise on social media and stuff. It's like, hey, let's focus on real research, real science. Let's use this to your advantage, and you can be just as smart as I am. I just spent longer doing this, longer time, right? And so then you empower your patients with information where then they're better at their job in reaching these goals because it just doesn't, you can't throw all this stuff at somebody at once. It's you give them some ways to improve their quality of life, and then that may open the door for, "Hey, what if you changed your diet? Hey, what if you exercise? Hey, what if you slept better? Hey," then, oh my gosh, it's always I'm always learning, right, from my patients that I it's, it's fascinating to see where that goes and humbling.
Out of curiosity, have you always taken that approach with helping empower patients to start sort of with, sort of almost like one thing or one win and then sort of get the opportunity? Or were you like if you were like most of us surgeons or doctors tend to be like, no, I see the whole picture and I want you to do everything because I know that's what's going to get you the best thing. But I'm curious, was that something that you've evolved to?
So, I would have been really smart if I would have done it like I just said, and you hit it on the head. I knew what I could do for people, and I made the mistakes of throwing everything at once, and I learned very quickly that that doesn't work, and it didn't make sense either. It was probably more enthusiasm and just excited that I wanted to help people and I knew how to do it, and I was humbled so quickly in finding out that, hey, you gotta build foundations and you gotta take steps. And not everybody's gonna go where you want them to go. So you gotta it's an art, right? And it's and you gotta continue to respect that. And so I'd like to say I was really smart and yeah, that's what I thought, but no, I made all the mistakes, right?
That you were smart enough to realize it. Yeah, and a lot of people that continue to just to bang their head against the wall, trying to you know ask patients to do things that maybe is too much. So
I would you can't say enough about how smart your patients make you. Um, and they can never ask a bad question. They can ask it in different ways that you never thought of things before. But yeah, it's a true, um, you're, you gotta figure out where that person is going to be comfortable. And I think you always are going to win when you start out more minimalistic and get and let them experience some changes in certain ways of um, whatever you're working on. There's definite ways to go about working on metabolism or the immune system or the microbiome or things to get changes quickly and then get them engaged and then just working through steps.
and on that note, to make this very concrete, what are the most common reasons that people will actually come to you to sort of start a treatment program, whether it be peptides or something else? But what are the most common, health issues or symptoms or complaints that people will come in to see you for?
Well, it's very broad based. It's it's that older person who feels that they've lost those golden years and they just want a little bit more out of their life to be able to just improve their quality. It's always quality of life, by the way. Everything's quality of life. It's not I never have anybody come into me. I never have anybody come to me and say, "I wanna live longer." It's like, how can you make tomorrow better for me?" Right? And so so you see patients that that think they're healthy, right? And that are just looking to do better in the gym or better performance in the boardroom or um, do a better job when it comes to immunity because of their, more colds or things like that. Or you get the complicated things of real immune diseases or genetic diseases or that's where it's expanded because I tend to see things that where people have seen a lot of people, and I'm like, I'm not the last resort because there are many people as smart as I am, or I shouldn't say smart, have the experience, and um, but I tend to see these people that are desperate because they haven't gotten any answers or they haven't gotten there, and that's where I really learned the power of just take it slow and show them they're capable, giving them the confidence, right? So I see all kinds of issues that people come for. So, for instance, I'll even have people that'll come to me and say, "Dr. C's, I'm looking to lose weight," and I'll be like, "Okay, so let's dive into that." Um, and what I try to explain to people is like, "Okay, what if I kind of reworded this for you and said, what if I told you like, if we go down this road of these Ozempics and we'll go these, GLP-1s, if we're looking at the potential of using something like that, what if I told you weight loss is a side effect? It's what is this peptide going to do for the cell and cell efficiency and cellular resilience? And like, what if I told you that was my play here and what I want to do? And the weight loss will happen, but we have to do it right. And I think that's where a big disconnect has been also, unfortunately, and keeps you guys probably really busy too.
Yeah. I don't know if it's obvious to viewers, but, sitting here next to you, I can tell you're a shining example of living with great vitality, above the age of 50. And, you have incredible amounts of energy. You have clearly a very robust physique and a lot of passion for life. And, I'm curious if you, can share sort of, what are some of the things that, that you do for yourself to sort of, for you to be able to live every year sort of better than the last,
Sure,
and also why it's important to you.
sure, sure. Well, let me start out by saying I still make all the mistakes everybody makes in sometimes pushing myself too hard, and that's something I don't know if I'll ever be able to get past that. But I'm fortunate to have spent all this time to build my knowledge base to actually be an example to my patients, to show them that the age is not a discriminator. I'm 63, and I every year I am stronger, faster, smarter. Um, I feel more alive. I feel more like there's more I want to take on. Um, and and I think it's because it didn't have. I've worked very hard at it. It's a discipline. It's a lifestyle that is um, that's constantly changing. Um, so people say, "Doctor C's, what diet do you follow?" Well, I keep changing my diet. I keep adjusting it. I'll go Mediterranean, carnivore, paleo, mix of keto and carnivore. I mean, you have to respect, and I think this is the best way to give an example of if you lift a weight and you lift it many times, the cell changes, it hypertrophies, it gets stronger, but then it plateaus. And no matter how much you keep working at that same exercise, it doesn't change. But if I change the type of exercise in a different way to stimulate that muscle, I then change it again. And that's because the cell is, remember, this thing's intelligent. It's adapted. It's adapted to the environment I've set for it because it's smarter than I am. So it's like, okay, met these goals. You can do it as much as you want. You got to give me something more. So it's no different than all of the things that I do with or that I've come to respect. Like there is no one diet. There is not one fasting program. There is not one exercise program. There is not one. Uh, there's not one supplement you take forever, which is wrong. It's changing. It's constantly changing because your cells are adapting.
And how often do you think things need to be changed up? And I imagine it may be different for different types of cells or functions, but generally speaking.
So that's a great question. And that's if you're working with a patient, you kind of learn that they're the patients that haven't been in this world and they're just starting, they they adapt really quick. or I mean, they can get some big changes really quick and keep moving for quite a while, and then they reach a plateau, and that could go for 6 months or a year, just depending on what you're working on, and then you get the people that are more fit and more resilient and, to adaptation and are more resilient, and those are the people that are kind of where you kinda have to change it up. If you had to pick a number, I kinda have this 3-month rule, 3 or 4-month rule where you gotta just change at that period of time. It's become I can't I'm sure we'll validate this in some way in years to come as AI helps us sift through, genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, metabolomics. It'll help us make those decisions much better. But I kinda use that, and that's what I've done. That's how I kinda manage my life and, "Okay, it's 3, 4 months, things are getting stale, what are we gonna do next? What am I gonna work on?" Is that it's a and every time I think I have it right, I I think, "Oh my gosh, I'm training better," and then I because my life does focus around exercise. I mean, I think I can't say it enough, exercise and nutrition and sleep and stress. I mean, I have all these other great tools and I think they're awesome and it's what balances this whole process and you can make up things that you lose with aging, but it's that whole big picture.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Now, for people who are watching and they may be interested in thinking, "Gosh, is this for me?" Is there anybody who is not a candidate to have treatment?
Absolutely. So they're the people not to have treatment are the people that aren't engaged that come to you and say, "Do your stuff to me and I'll do it and I don't want to know anything more." That's not the right person. They have to be engaged. They have to be asking questions or it's never going to work. Um, I made those mistakes early, where um, you'd have, I mean, perfect example would be the long time ago when the athlete would come with their agent and their agent would do all the talking, but the
Yeah,
patient wasn't talking
they
to you.
wouldn't even be there.
And you're like, well, what do you think of whatever he says, And I'd be like, can't help you.
And do you think that's because a lot of people want sort of the silver bullet, and that's what they think a peptide might be, but
100%. You can't, you couldn't, what makes a peptide or a supplement or a repurposed drug really work well? It's when you engage exercise and nutrition and sleep. It takes it to a whole nother level. I mean, you can do things to help people kind of get on that track. Um, that's what I said, how these can be powerful tools to get the patient engaged. And I have to say, one of the most powerful tools I've seen today now are these GLP-1s. And what's interesting is I've been teaching and utilizing GLP-1s for over 10 years. I mean, we started in this area of talking about how GLP-1s and the research was there. It's always been there in cell efficiency and what it does to improve um, metabolism. And the game changer that was something that had to be done every day and twice a day, like an injection. Well, that wasn't an easy thing to do with people then. But for the people that we were utilizing them to help cell efficiency, it was a game changer.
yeah.
But until 2017, I think that's when the first ad for Ozempic came out, and they used that music to "Oh, oh, oh, it's Ozempic." It was like they stole this great song Magic and they put Ozempic in it, and you can't get that out of your head. It was brilliant, and it was the first time they'd ever advertised directly to people, right? Well, it was once a week. Game changer. Compliance, people started thinking about it then, and so that was a pivotal moment of where all of a sudden I had a better tool because of compliance. And so I could use one tool and get the patient engaged where, "Oh my gosh, you were right. I lost this weight, but boy, I feel better. My brain fog is gone. My anxiety is better. I feel more energized. My workouts and recovery is better." Um, and of course, a lot of other things went into to working with the GLP ones at that time, but you captured the patient, and then it just went from there, right? And so I hope that gives you some.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of Ozempic, a trending term in sort of in the aesthetic industry is the notion of an Ozempic makeover. So, using Ozempic really obviously, losing weight, but with the losing weight, a physical transformation happening, that often combined with other aesthetic treatments, whether they be, non-surgical or surgical. But I wanted to ask for your opinion. Do you think that is sort of a sensible concept, or do you think there's something misguided in it, or
Uh, I think it's a complicated answer, uh, but I think it goes back to understanding what your objectives are and what losing weight, whether it's through Ozempic or any other matter of, if you're going to lose weight fast, things aren't going to go great. That's just you're headed in the wrong direction. It's about doing it slowly, and at the same time, when you're losing weight, um, when the cell's getting more efficient in how it utilizes its nutrients, um, it changes. The metabolism changes, uh, and so it's really like with Ozempic, for instance, it's trying to let the cells utilize its own fat basically to improve its efficiency. And so that's something that you have to respect and understand that it's not something you want to accomplish in 2 or 3 months. It's something that can take a good year, a year and a half to do appropriately over time so that you don't, so that you can, the rest of the body can catch up with potentially what's happening with that weight loss. Because if people don't realize this, when they're overweight, um, that's a true inflammatory state of the body, and the fat is different, the immune system's different, and so a lot of things are changing when you're using something like that, and you have to respect that. And you have to have other things happening also. You've got to stimulate, you got to get people into um, an exercise program to work on muscle, for instance, because I don't care what weight loss program you go through, you're going to lose muscle. But what people don't understand is the muscle they're losing if they're doing it right with GLP-1s, it's inefficient muscle. It's muscle that your body is going to remove because it's not efficient. So again, the body's brilliant. It's going to remove that. It doesn't mean your strength's going to change. It just means some muscle will go, but it has to go so that the overall goal is to improve more efficiency of more cells. And so you got to pay attention to that. You got to pay attention to hydration. There's all these things that go into doing something appropriately. And that's the problem that I that I believe is my thought out there, that people they're healthcare providers that have the right intention. They just don't have enough information I think, to do it correctly. And that's what I
and on that note, do you think that GLP-1, like semaglutide, Ozempic, is actually more favorable compared to something like tirzepatide, GLP with GIP?
so that's a really good question. I think every generation, so Ozempic is a a single peptide, a GLP-1 that's made by the L cell. Um, Tirzepatide is two peptides. It's a GLP-1 and a GIP, which is a glucagon inhibitory peptide. And it's focused on making it a little more efficient in that weight loss process, in the cell's efficiency of utilizing fat, but also working on insulin sensitivity a little better around the body and glucose absorption. So it takes it a little step further. And then there's the next coming retatrutide, which is a triple agonist, three peptides, which is GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. And that addition of glucagon does some things to add to the liver to be even better metabolically while you're going through this change to give you energy when it's needed. So, and to, it just, you're mimicking more of the natural changes that happen. We're getting smarter that, okay, it isn't just one thing that happens. There's multiple communications that are happening. And so you're going to keep seeing iterations of this and it just gets better. So if you ask me, is tirzepatide, is semaglutide a good peptide? I'd say absolutely. Is tirzepatide better? Yes, it is. Is retatrutide, this next peptide that will probably be FDA approved in 2025, is that better? Absolutely. Because they're getting more efficient in mimicking the normal communication of cells. And it's just going to keep going that way.
And do you have any concerns maybe they work too well where it's causing people to lose weight too quickly and that,
So, in the wrong hands, absolutely. Yeah, you have to respect that. And so does it, with each iteration, do you have the potential of losing more weight? Yes. But you have to understand that and you have to really dial it back and utilize it correctly.
but at the same time saying because there are additional peptides that are having additional physiologic improvements that you would, that you believe that the newer agents typically are better, but they need to be used properly.
Correct. And there's less side effects because you're becoming more efficient. And that's the game changer. And so it's yeah, I think it's just having that understanding that you have to be even more respectful of the up and coming better peptide.
Please join us next episode for part 2 of our interview with Dr. Seeds.